welcome to the ADNA Presents. This is Roy Samuelson, and today we have Ellie Schiff. Ellie is a voice actor and AD narrator. It's so good to have you, Ellie. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So excited.
It's good to see your face again. I feel like we've only ever seen each other in person like a couple times, but we talk all the time. So.
No kidding. This is really happening. Yeah, we do the Zoom calls for video for the interviewers and myself to interact, and then the final output is just audio. So we can even give some description now since everyone's basically going to need audio description. So my hair is literally poofed up like 4 inches around some cans, and I'm wearing like a long sleeve gray t-shirt with like a clapboard behind me and some bass traps. Ellie, you want to give yours?
I feel like you always look good, Roy. You're a little hard on
shucks.
yourself, man.
Yeah. All right, fair enough.
I'm in my home booth. I'm surrounded with gray foam. I got my microphone in front of me. I got dark hair kind of brushed up and my dark glasses and my green polo shirt.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to look fancy for our interview, which is only going to be audio. But yeah, I think that's it. I'm talking by my microphone.
There we go. Nice. And super handsome too.
Oh, shucks.
What do you love about audio description, Ellie?
There's so many things to talk about with that. Well, first of all, that I got to meet people like you and so many amazing narrators and writers, which has been awesome. I think my favorite part is getting to kind of dive into different genres that I may not necessarily get to work on all the time. It's really fun to be able to do a comedy and then maybe a heavy drama and then a little kids show. And sometimes you can work on all these things in a week. And I love how specific the sounds are for each of them and getting to work both as an actor and a narrator on learning the tones of a show. Because now that I've been doing this for a few years, I look back at some of the earlier stuff that I've done and I'm just like, yeah, I should have kind of understood that a little bit better. But hopefully I've improved with age as a fine wine.
There you go. You're fine wine. But it's also the experience, right? The more work you do, the better you get at it, just like with anything.
For sure.
So that tells me that you being able to recognize some things that you would have chosen differently shows, yeah, we're all growing.
Yeah.
It's great to hear about that. Could you go a little more detail about the different kinds of genres? And if you could be a little more specific, we don't want any Ellie trade secrets revealed because that's your jam. But what specific things could you share with our audience about why different genres matter? Like, why not just do the same voice all the time?
To me, I just find that if you're doing the same voice for every single project, you're probably not going to be matching the vibe of it, and you're taking away from those people who are listening at home. To me, I'm the kind of person who loves to just kind of fall right into it. So, for example, when I'm watching a show, even when there are, especially comedy, if there's the closed captioned on it, oftentimes I'll get distracted by the closed captions and I'll be paying attention to that. And there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people love that sort of thing. But for me, when it comes to matching the vibes of the show that you're watching so that the person who's listening with the audio description isn't taken out of the moment, that to me is the crucial part of narrating, because otherwise they could just use a text to speech or whatever and it wouldn't matter. So personally, I love getting the vibe of the show, getting to learn what it's all about. One of the shows I worked on, you can listen to the first season. I didn't totally get it. I've worked on Succession for 4 years. The first season, I thought it was like this heavy drama and I'm just kind of trying to be but then as I'm watching it, I realized how funny it was, like darkly funny, but really funny. As you get to understand the show and what it's like, you really can, I guess blend is the best word I feel for this. You want to blend in with the background and you don't want to take away from the audience.
And you do a lot of other voiceover work. I love the compare and contrast question. So could you compare audio description narration to maybe another type of voiceover work that you love to do? And what things are similar, what things are different?
You know, it's funny because I feel like there's a lot that audio description takes from other things to make it work properly. I love doing character work. For example, I just played this character that was the Lizard King. Yes. But you're not really going to use that with description. But you still have to fit the vibe of the game, for example. So you have to understand where things are. It's all a matter of acting. Another example, like I love promo work because it has also musicality, a feel to it. Also, and dubbing, you're kind of coming in both of those in a certain timings. You have to fit it in certain times. And you have to do that a lot with narration as well. You got to be able to fit between the dialogue in such a way that you're not rushing, but you're kind of getting the information out there. You're matching the energy of the scene, and you're in and out. So you're not stepping on what the actors are doing on camera. So to me, I feel like that's the important difference. With narration for description, you're really trying to blend in with the program. Whereas in most other genres, you're kind of trying to stand out to some degree. Like with promo, you want to be the voice of the exciting thing that's happening. So you can remind people to come see it. With narration, I'm not sure if it was you or someone else who described it to me as like you're sitting on the couch next to your buddy, you're kind of letting them know what's happening, but you're not really the center of attention. You're not the one who the focus should be on. That's my little way of getting around with description. I try to blend as much as possible.
I'm thinking about how you said you don't want to take the audience out of the moment. If you can address this, there's something about you being in the moment, being present.
Mm-hmm.
You've mentioned a lot of the technical skills that you bring from the timing of promo work and that musicality. Can you talk a little bit about that immediacy, the being in the moment yourself and what that experience feels like?
Over the past winter, I was fortunate to work on One Tree Hill. And that is one show that has kind of been a classic because it has such a blend of different things. There's music, like montages, there's drama, emotional drama, there's suspense, people driving off a bridge and do they live, do they die? There's so many different types of genres in that one show, which is so fun to watch, that you have to really be in the moment when you're watching it. You don't want to act blasé when a car accident is happening or someone has a heart attack, and you have to really understand what's going on, be in the moment, bring your narration to life in such a way that it blends together. I keep using the word blend. I really do feel like it's so important to blend into the moment. And that goes back to, again, speaking about just using that same tone over and over and over. And that's what I worry about when it comes to like text-to-speech or AI. I mean, I know we've discussed this. There's a strike going on, and it's so important right now for people to stand up for actors to do these things. Because down the road, if it disappears, there's little control over what's going to happen. And I think our blind and low vision community deserves the best kind of narration for these shows, the same way that they wouldn't just put together some schlocky show. We really should be doing the same thing for those audiences. We want them to enjoy it the same way. Equity. We want everyone to be able to have these experiences. It's so important to both work with SAG with, what they're doing now. We had talked earlier a little bit about the strike, right? We just talked about how it's so important to stand with SAG right now. And there are certain contracts that we can't work under, the AMTPT contracts. But that's the reason that we do this, is so that we can, in the future, do better. We don't want to be replaced with text-to-speech or AI, which is not really going to bring the same emotional equivalence that real actors can bring.
Nicely said.
That to me is important.
Yeah, it is. And going back to what you said earlier about the access is more than just checking a box. We've made it explicitly clear that that immersion of the audience is deserved, sighted or blind.
Yeah.
And if sighted people can have that feeling, that emotion, and be able to share it with someone else, that our AD audiences can also too, wherever they are on the blindness spectrum. I love how you said about the SAG-AFTRA impact that it has, and that there's obviously a lot of nuance here. You and I are talking specifically, as is most of this podcast, talking about film and TV AD, that you and I have joked
I
earlier.
should have, prefaced the fact that I've only done really that sort of work.
But that's it. It's like, that's where I think we find that there's a lot of people that don't really understand. They go to TikTok, or I have no interest, and I've said this a million times, I have no interest in reading a blind person's Twitter feed or reading their emails or their calendar appointments.
Right. Or even the newspaper.
So there's a lot of space for that kind of AI contribution.
Right.
And yet, when it comes to this, there still is a little bit of soul that's important. And not to mention protecting, as you had pretty clearly alluded to, that this is pretty impactful for everyone. So it's nice to have the support of the SAG-AFTRA union to keep us going.
Yeah, well put.
We've always talked about the Wild West of audio description, and a lot of that has to do with the limitations of awareness.
Yeah.
On all aspects, that I, as a voice talent, am not fully aware of what the engineer does or what the writer does. The writer doesn't know what I do. The AD company may not understand some of the work behind the scenes that we've invested our own careers and time and money in to be able to deliver what we do in such a short time. That the companies that hire the AD companies, I mean, it just expands like that, that there is a lot of silo mentality where everything's kind of squished together. I guess I'm leading up to the question, that awareness is building, but it still feels really volatile. Do you feel like that volatility exists, or do you feel like that's a good thing? It's kind of stirring the pot and getting stuff settled in a better way, or what's your culture on AD?
It's interesting. I find that a lot of times in many areas of entertainment, there are basic protocols in place, but a lot of Wild West, as you put it, happening. There's certain rules, but when it comes to AD in particular, there was a bunch of stuff that I really wish had more of a okay, this happens and this happens and this happens, and it's clear between all the parties involved. For instance, when I worked on One Tree Hill, there's 187, I believe, episodes. I probably had upward of 10 different writers. So the episodes would vary in terms of the narration. Sometimes there was a lot and it was very heavy, and sometimes there was not much at all. And of course, I can probably narrate quicker, and this is no disrespect to the writers, but writers have to sit and watch everything and really be very clear on what they want to narrate, whereas I just kind of get the loops and I narrate it and I go through it and it's done. So they probably needed to have a bunch of different writers on for the purpose of getting it done quickly. But most of the time I find that they send it and it's like, get this back to me yesterday, like it's interesting to see. Sometimes, especially if it's like a weekly show that's coming out, like when I did The White Lotus, they would send them to me and I'd know I'd get them by, let's say, a Tuesday, and I'd have till Wednesday to get it to them. So I have a day or so. With some of these other ones, especially shows that have aired already, I know like you've worked on a few of those also, probably around the same time that I was doing One Tree Hill. They give you a bunch at a time. And so it's just like, okay, you can sit in the booth and record them all day long. But at a certain point also, you want each episode to feel like its own individual thing. You don't want to sound bored, because at that point, you probably should step out of the booth. But yeah, when it comes down to the question you were asking earlier, one of the things that still boggles my mind is the fact that it can move from one streaming platform to another, or one network to the streaming platforms, and have different narration on them. Because there's no protocol in place to be like, yes, once it moves from here to here, this is what we do. It's like, okay, well, we're going to this platform. I don't know if there's narration, so we're going to hire a writer and a narrator, or several writers and narrators or whatever. So there definitely are parts of description that I wish were more streamlined and made things more user-friendly also for the end user. There have been times where I've gone on to various platforms and couldn't find how to turn it on. I'm sighted, so you would think that it would be a simple click or something, but that's not always the case. And I imagine you would want to make it as easy as possible to make it accessible for those who can't see or who need to use this function. I have a few little gripes, but for the most part, I feel like it's a great area to work in. And I appreciate how dedicated all of the narrators and writers really, truly are, and engineers and everyone, down the line. I feel like those who do work hard on these, they want them to be the best possible end result for the listener.
I'm thinking about this meme that was out a few years back. It was a GIF that had a baby panda that was hugging a ball, and someone reached toward it, and the baby panda had this like frowny face smile and kind of kept the ball away from the camera, like, don't take this ball. And it was so cute and pouty. And I think that we've been talking about cinema to streaming, of how for some reason the video of the film or the series seems to pretty easily pass from each place to each place, because obviously
Mm.
that the AD doesn't. I myself have been replaced at least a dozen times that I've been told on projects, and I've replaced people 5 times that I've been known about. And it's like that kind of, "Oh, I'm going to keep this for myself," is not intentional, I don't think, but it is a systemic problem. And there seems to be some really good solutions that are coming soon that will be able to address some of that. And that's really exciting too, that everyone wins with that. The AD companies, the blind audiences, the AD audiences themselves, and also the people who do the work like us on every aspect of the roles.
You have to wonder why they do that. What's the reason that they do move it from one to another and then use a different narrator or writer or both? I know that in terms of pay for some of these things, you wonder because they're paying now another person or several people to redo something that's already done. So you have to wonder why they do that. I don't really have a good answer for that. Do you have any thoughts?
I've
I'm not
got
even sure.
speculations. I've got
Yeah.
some pretty solid speculations, but I think the big point about it is that there is some systemic changes that need to happen to address the things that everyone's talking about. And I'm really excited that it feels like we're on the cusp of finally not only getting audio description awareness going, but also some of these problems being solved simultaneously. I had the honor of being on a few panels at Comic-Con. As a SAG-AFTRA member, I can't talk about any shows that I'm on or
Right.
attend a con, but this was a educational purpose, and SAG-AFTRA cleared it 6 ways to Sunday because I was like, "I can't come, I'm not allowed," but they said, "No, you can go under the circumstances," and we were talking about some of the things that were happening in audio description and also comic books. It was a really cool overlap.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, yeah. There's a whole idea of that, and, the Sandman is an audiobook now,
Cool.
so there's people that are recognizing the spillover, but one of the questions came from the audience who works for the credits of films and series, and her very clear assumption is, "So you're in the credits though, right? Why aren't you in the credits?" And it's like, just that question alone, it wasn't prompt. I wasn't trying to fish. I had no idea that she worked in credits. I'm not a manipulator here, but it was like there was something about her having that discovery and saying, "Yeah,
You're like,
this should
let
be a
us
part of
talk
it."
after this panel.
I'm like, I'm letting go and letting God on that one. I wanted to. I'm like, "You, me, come on, let's go, let's talk." But I'm like, she knows my name. If she wants to look me up, I'd love to talk to her. But it's like the fact of her publicly making a statement of this might make sense. I don't know how to do that. I've talked to producers who have said it's impossible because of the way the process works.
Not necessarily, because when you look at dubbing, it's kind of like that. I mean, there are certain networks that do that. Netflix, I'm pretty sure, does have some of the credits. Hulu's weird about it. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It depends if it's like in the country or not in the country. It's a whole other ball of wax. But Netflix often will list the American credits, the French credits, the various different places. So I don't know that it's impossible. There has to be a desire for this sort of thing. And that's why I think it's so important that you have the ADNA, because there are people who are curious about that. I know when I'm familiar with one of the narrators and they're doing the description, I'm like, oh, that's the person, and I love their description. And I will more often than not leave it on so I can listen to what they're doing, so I can learn from them. I feel like I'm always constantly trying to get better and learn. It's so important that we do have these credits because it really could impact a lot of different people. Whether or not we're listed on IMDb, at least we know, okay, we have a new credit, we can send it over to the ADNA, and it's important for people who are looking for it.
Yeah, and that's just a stopgap. It might last longer if IMDb recognized it and had its own AD section.
Well, IMDb's got weird things with the credits because sometimes we're in sound and sometimes we're part of the production. It's
Yeah,
odd.
yeah, it's very odd.
And it's also strange with dubbing because sometimes we're listed also in the credits and sometimes we're not in terms of IMDb. Yeah, I know there have been a bunch of stuff that I've kind of had to put through a few times, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
When you think about where you want audio description to go, like what's some of the first things that come to mind? What would you love to see?
I would love to have description for a lot of the older shows and movies that aren't still described. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, hundreds of thousands of hours of programming that people still watch. My in-laws, thank God, they've got great eyesight, but as they get older, my father-in-law will watch Gunsmoke or some of these older shows. I don't think most of them have description. And so you have these shows that could clearly bring good energy and memories to the people who are watching them if they could watch them, but they might not be able to as their eyesight may go. And that's for all of us. At some point, everyone's eyesight gets a little bit worse, if not, not completely blind. But it would be nice if we can still go back and, hey, honey, remember when we watched this when we were in our 20s or 30s or 40s or whatever? Those memories help keep people young. So I would love it if some of these older shows had it available. Even some of the newer ones I was surprised don't have it. I was watching Shameless recently on Netflix, and that doesn't have description. And I was really surprised because it's a pretty modern show. It just finished. I think it's run in 2021, maybe. I wonder why that doesn't have it.
The Isle of Misfit Toys, the Isle of TV shows
Yeah,
without AD.
that is true.
There's something about what you brought up, that memory connection. I'm going to use the word connection too, that being able to connect with others
Mm,
and be able to experience it. That cultural experience means so much to all of us.
yeah.
And blind or sighted on the blindness spectrum, it makes a difference to be able to hang out. The thing that really was my inciting incident was my friend that sadly he passed away, but during his
Mm,
cancer treatment, he went completely blind. And it was in the middle of one of the seasons of one of the shows that we had both watched. And we picked up like nothing. We weren't talking about the nurse giving all the IV
right.
medications and all the scary stuff. It was like we could just connect and
Yeah.
laugh. And I didn't have to explain anything. It wasn't that speed bump on the conversation. That's what AD brings to me. And I think of that in the context of how we work together, whether the AD narrator is sighted or blind. There's so many opportunities here that are really being considered in ways that haven't been before, in positive ways, that several companies are prioritizing working with blind individuals and professionals.
Yes, that was the other thing I wanted to bring up. The fact that there are so many blind individuals working in the genre itself, and how it's amazing that it's possible and not even hard to do. From our friend Satana, this is some of the work that she does. And as long as she has whatever the proper,
Yeah, Satana has the skills. It's hard for someone who doesn't understand what they're doing, but like you said, she's developed the skills,
but that's,
the professionals.
any
Exactly.
genre of
Yeah,
voiceover.
that the work has been put in.
The other thing is that they're also having representation a bit more like they are in the rest of the voiceover world. That's such a big thing to have somebody who can really represent their background in narration just as any other area of voiceover. It's really important. We can go into more detail about all that, but I'm just glad to see that there's more of that happening. I think it's really important that it exists.
Ellie, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience?
I think one of the things I was thinking of the other day is just how I so appreciate the other narrators, particularly like you and I have become pretty close as friends. And I have to say, I love how open and warm the narration community has been because I was some dumb kid, didn't really know what I was doing when I first started. But I mean, in any genre, people really don't know a lot when they're first starting. But for the most part, I haven't gotten people say, "Oh, you were so bad, and now you've gotten better." But it is so nice that I remember when we did the first interview, and I was just like, "Why is he interviewing me? I don't know what I'm doing," you know. And I still don't really, but a little bit more than I did. I do want to say how much I appreciate that. I've gotten to a point where I'm actually teaching a little bit of description, which has been such a wonderful experience for me. I mean, just to hear people who, like me, when you're first starting, they didn't really know what they were doing when we were first starting class. And over 3-4 weeks, getting to hear them really improve in their reads and get to understand what description's about and like why it's important. And you're not just reading the words because anyone could just read words. To really understand that you are acting, you're just acting on a very subtle level. They keep saying you're matching the vibe, you're blending, you're getting the information out there while not distracting. And that to me was such a great experience getting to see what other people, how they took to it. There were a few people who just were like connected in right away. And then there were a couple of people who kind of had to push them a little. It's like, you got to smile when you talk. I can hear it. So let's hear it when you're doing your description on a comedy. I can totally see you working in this field. Let me hear you do it. And they were under those assumptions that it has to be talked like this. It can't be any emotion at all. And you can't really say anything different. And I'm just like, then by doing that, you're taking away from the audience. You're not giving them yourself. Then you could use text to speech at that point. It was a great learning experience for me to hear what other people could do. I feel like I just got to know that I enjoy teaching more than I realized because that was something that I didn't really picture myself as. I'm like, you don't know enough, you're not an expert enough or whatever. But it wasn't about that in the end. It's just about getting people to understand and learn and appreciate a genre that they maybe didn't know before. I'm not teaching at the Roy Samuelson level yet, but
We're all at our level, man. It's like the more teachers, the
yeah.
better. I should not be the only AD coach out there. You and I shouldn't be the only ones.
No, I'm sure there are others also. But, to me, it was one of those areas that I knew that there was more of a need for because there aren't a million narrators. There are a lot, but not enough, I feel like. Otherwise, you wouldn't have all these shows that are not narrated. It was nice to bring in the next generation of narrators.
So, Ellie, if you could share with our audience some social media links, websites that we can follow you, anything that you'd like to promote or share. I know promotion is kind of a tricky word with the SAG after strike. So let me.
Yeah, right now, I mean, it's weird, especially working during a strike, because as an actor, you want to support your fellow actors and you don't want to really step on any lines or cross any lines to do work. But a lot of the voiceover genres don't fall under the same contract that's being struck. So video games, for example, are totally fine, and commercials and other things. It's really very interesting to be a voice actor, specifically during an actor strike and writer strike, which also is super important. My website is my name, Elliot Schiff, www.elliotschiff.com. You can find me there, clips and whatever various voiceover stuffs. I'm also on Instagram, elliot.schiff, or on Twitter @ElliotSchiff, and on LinkedIn. My name is Ellie Schiff, ELI, like short for Elliot. So it's Ellie Schiff VO. You can search for me. You can find me on there. I would love to connect with fellow like-minded description peoples.
Thanks so much for joining us, Ellie.